police in New London, Connecticut are perplexed after Senior Coast Guard Officer Richard Eastman and his car full of top-secret equipment disappear without a trace. It's been 6 months, and the mystery remains unsolved. Psychic Pat Gagliardo wonders if her puzzling visions might help find Eastman. She goes to the state's attorney's office.
When Pat came along, I mean, we were at a dead end. We had no place to go but up.
When I arrived at the state's attorney's office, I was met by Inspector Ed Pickett. The gentleman greeted me very kindly, and he said, "Don't be so nervous." I said, "Well, this is my first time meeting with a detective in something like this." And he said, "Well, this is the first time I'm meeting a psychic, so we're even."
I think they all have to be put through a test, because we've had people come in and say they were psychic, and they were no more psychic than I am, and I'm not psychic, believe me. But you have to test it to be sure. It's just like you pick up evidence. You have to test it to make sure it's something to do with your case, or it's no good to you at all.
To prove her psychic abilities to the detective, Pat asks him for a personal object.
What she wanted was something that was close to our body.
He gives her his wristwatch, and she begins seeing things.
I closed my eyes. I told him the color of his house. I told him that his wife wore a uniform, that she was in fact a nurse. I saw that he had cans at the bottom of his driveway. And I said to him, "Did you recently tar?" Or he said, "Yeah, just a few days ago."
Flabbergasted is one word. Amazed is another word. Unbelievable is another word. I mean, you can go on and on and on with adjectives for it, but it was pretty enlightening, put it that way.
Pickett is ready to put Pat to the test. He hands her Richard Eastman's credit card.
So I held the card. I closed my eyes, I did my deep breathing. And the very first thing was kind of a recap of all of the pictures and images that I had had in my own meditations. But then I was bombarded.
She visualized water, and he being in water. And it had to be some way like that where a car could go in, because he was with the car. That's what she kept saying, he's with the car.
Then I saw the man in uniform, and this time I saw him slumped over. I didn't know if he was slumped over a seat. All I know was the man in uniform, and he was slumped over.
I couldn't believe what was going on. It sounded pretty preposterous to me, you know, that somebody could tell you this. But when you reach a dead end, anything you come along, you have to grasp at.
To find Richard Eastman, detectives will have to solve a psychic's puzzle one piece at a time when we return. Psychic Pat Gagliardo has joined the search for missing Coast Guard officer Richard Eastman. But first, the investigator has to make sense of her visions.
When you're trying to take evidence from a psychic, it's pretty difficult to do. I mean, you don't know where to start with them.
Pat clutches the officer's credit card and begins to pick up a vibration. Her visions suddenly become more specific.
Then I saw this ferry boat. There was a lighthouse. There was a Tin Man. There was a long ferry slip. There were things that were now coming to me that were not a part of my previous impressions and visions.
Pickett needs to figure out what these puzzling images have to do with the case. He decides to take the psychic on a drive through New London. What he sees in the store window shocks him to the core.
One of the things was something about a Tin Man. She didn't know what part it played in it, but she did have visions of a Tin Man. Well, when we were coming back on Howard Street, coming on to Bank Street in New London.
And he turned and he looked at me and he said, "What did you say about a Tin Man?"
And in the front window of the store, there was a Tin Man made out of elbows and nipples, and he had a hat on, and his arms were extended out, and tin shoes on and everything. It was amazing.
Right next door to the Tin Man is the 419 bar, the last place Richard Eastman was ever seen.
And when I saw the Tin Man, I was actually flabbergasted. I couldn't get over the fact that the Tin Man existed.
As they drive, Pickett fits another piece of the puzzle into place.
When she first talked to me in the office, she said something about cranes played some part. And the more I thought of it, the more I realized that there were cranes there during a period of time when he disappeared.
He suddenly knows where they have to go.
Mr. Pickett says, it's time for us to head down to the city pier. I still had Mr. Eastman's credit card in my pocket. And I saw that ferry slip, and I looked to the right, and my insides started to shake. They were like strong vibration.
As they walk out onto the city pier, a powerful sensation comes over the psychic.
And my body went into that tremendous trembling. I could feel it, but you couldn't see it.
You could see that she was upset. You know, I said to her something to the effect, "Are you all right?"
And I looked at him and I said, physically, yes. Emotionally, psychically, no. This is where he is. I feel it. He looked at me and he said, let's just walk around the other side, on the other dock.
Police divers had already searched the harbor for a body or a sunken car. The psychic is convinced that they missed something.
He looked at me and he said, but the divers told me they have already searched this area. And I said, then they need to search it again.
And I kept saying, you know, we've already done this before with divers.
And I looked him square in the eyes and I said, you're gonna find him right here. This is where he is, inside that car.
Could an unproven psychic find the missing man on her first attempt? Pickett finds out when we return. In the case of the missing Coast Guard officer, detectives have followed first-time psychic Pat Gagliardo to the water's edge. She urges them to go one step further.
Then you need to send the divers back in there. I know this is where Mr. Eastman is.
During the normal course of the investigation, the police had divers go down and check the area around the city pier.
Pat is convinced that the divers had missed something. Pickett mulls the decision overnight, then knows what he has to do.
I called the police department the next morning and told Lieutenant Bucko that I had information from an informant that the Eastman car was probably in the water right at the Fisher's Island ferry slip. And that the divers should return to the area and check it over very closely. And while they were at it, to do the whole dock.